This is the Tame Aperture podcast.
Open the pod bay doors, Cal.
I'm sorry, Gabe. I'm afraid I can't do that.
Welcome to the Tame Aperture podcast, where we discuss movies from first-time directors, indie films, art house, and much, much more. Today on the show, we open up our horror month with the 1984 slasher classic by Wes Craven, A Nightmare on Elm Street, starring Heather Langenkamp and Robert Englund as the notorious dreamstalker Freddy Krueger. Also, we get our first glimpse into teen heartthrob Johnny Depp. So buckle up and get ready as we discuss the meaning, the culture, and style of A Nightmare on Elm Street. Let's get it started.
Hell yes, I'm excited.
Alan, how are you?
Dude, I'm good. I'm so happy that it's October.
We're back in the mix.
This is my favorite time of year, like by far. And starting off with a classic too.
Yes. So I thought to myself, we gotta start off October with a horror film, and we got to keep consistent throughout October with horror movies.
Yep.
It's horror month. It's only fitting that we review and look at horror films. So thanks for coming on such a short notice.
I love it.
And, I decided to do Nightmare on Elm Street on this one. In the coming cast this month, we'll have you kind of spearheading us into a Texas Chainsaw Massacre.
Favorite movie
and
all time.
And my buddy Donnie will spearhead us into Fright Night, the 1985 version. So
you're going all classics on this.
We're going classics.
All of them.
Keeping it in the 70s and 80s.
Yeah.
Which I think is the era, right?
Oh, for sure.
Classic, for
sure.
Traditional horror films.
For sure. I think that's kind of where it all started. Where the love for horror and the real horror buffs kind of came out of that era.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. So let's talk a little bit about Nightmare on Elm Street. The reason I chose this was because for me, it resonates as a child. And everybody has a movie that they saw that they probably shouldn't have when they were a kid.
Yep.
This was mine. And let me take you back to 1987. Okay. Now, keep in mind, Nightmare came out in 1984.
Mm-hmm.
And back in then, they would run theatrical releases much longer than they do nowadays.
Yeah.
I mean, you can get something like Endgame already on digital. And it
crazy.
Just came out. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So it was 1987. Parents went out of town. Our close friends are watching us. Okay. Now, me and my older sister are 6 years apart. So I'm 6 years old, gonna be 7.
Okay.
We go to Blockbuster, traditional. Right?
Yep.
The people that are watching us, the good friends that are watching us, I'm not going to throw any names under the bus. They're still good friends to this day, so I'm not going to. But nonetheless, they decide to let the older girls, my sister and her friend, choose the movie.
And so your sister's what, like 12?
She's 13.
13-year-old girls in the 80s. This is one thing I learned. Loved Nightmare on Elm Street.
They loved
and Friday the 13th. They loved them.
100%.
Yep.
So we're wandering around the aisles. We get to the checkout. I don't think the people watching us are even aware of what Nightmare on Elm Street is.
Yeah, probably not.
So they check it out. We get home, pop it in. It's the very first scene.
Yeah.
Is a bit frightening for a 6-year-old.
Yeah.
And you get into, here's the deal with it. I get into a position when you're young that you're also, the first scene comes up, it's Tina in the dream sequence, right? There's the boiler room, you see the claws, the whole little montage they're putting together. And as a 6-year-old, I'm frozen in my tracks. So not only, you can't just move when you can't get up and move to another room, because you're also weirdly fascinated because you're so scared, because you're feeling some kind of emotion.
Exactly.
Do you know what I mean?
Yep.
So I'm sitting there, and of course, 13-year-old girls are oblivious to the whole thing.
Oh, yeah.
She doesn't know that I'm 6 and I should never be seeing a movie like this. So I'm watching, so from the first scene all the way through, I watched the whole movie. I'm petrified. I think if you took a picture of me, I'd have been sweating, right? I remember there was a blanket over me. I was so scared, I couldn't move.
I can't even imagine.
That much I remember. And literally haunted me. And this is the irony behind it. You can ask my parents. It literally haunted me in my dreams until I was at high school.
So what were the next, I don't know if you even remember, what were the next few nights like when you try and go to sleep?
Horrific.
Yeah.
And my parents weren't home. They were still out of town. And so I didn't sleep.
Were you at your house or were you at
they came to our house to watch
well,
us.
that's good at least.
But nonetheless, I couldn't sleep. And then you can't wake them up at 2 a.m. and say, hey, exactly.
Right.
I'm scared.
Right.
Nor I couldn't move anyway because you're so frightened, as a kid.
Oh my God.
It was the worst. I think I probably should have had therapy afterwards.
Seriously.
Because even to this day, it's weird. When I first got married 15 years ago, we got married in August. We had a little condo. We went, and my wife was gone working, doing something one night. And on TV, the edited version, mind you, on cable, A Nightmare on Elm Street.
The cable, the safe version.
Yes.
Right.
My wife's gone. I'm in the condo alone, and I'm looking around. I'm weirdly addicted because it's that thing where now it's implanted in you. So I want to watch. I want to see Freddy. I want to do it all.
Right.
But I'm petrified. 24-year-old man. In my condo, and I'm not exaggerating, like it scared the shit out of me.
Oh, for sure.
And you can ask my wife, you can ask my parents, even to this day, they give me a hard time. Like, you're afraid of Freddy Krueger.
That movie left an impression on you.
100%.
Holy shit. Like it's left its mark.
Hugely. And 4 years ago, I'm teaching a class at the Los Angeles Film School. I'm teaching an editing class, cinema editing. And our program director comes up to us and says, hey, I got a buddy who's an editor, and his name's Rick Shane.
Oh, no way.
And I go, really? And they go, yeah. Would you like him to come guest speak to your students? Fucking A.
Yeah.
But at the time I wasn't thinking. And I go, Rick Shane, okay. And I start looking at his credits, real big movies. And I get down to the bottom, or one of his first credits. Not his first, but one of his first. And it says A Nightmare on Elm Street.
Oh, my God.
And I go, fuck, Rick. So the first time I meet him before he comes to class, I tell him, first off, I love A Nightmare on Elm Street. And I'm sure he gets this from everybody,
sure.
right? And we all know as filmmakers, like editing is has a huge role in how cinema plays out. But I said, secondly, pardon my French, Rick, but thanks for fucking up my childhood.
And your adulthood, it sounds like.
And I'm now to a point where I can actually watch it by myself and be okay. So this screening, as we were preparing for this podcast, I was able to watch it by myself.
Good.
And I got through it okay.
Good.
So I chose this movie for those reasons, but also because I'm still fascinated by it. I still think it holds a lot of value in the way that it was made and the way that it was put together, and we'll get into all those things. Give me, you hear my personal backstory behind the film, and even a cool little tie-in to some of the crew. Give me your impression or your kind of perspective about Nightmare on Elm Street, just on the general sense, and then we'll dig deeper here in a bit.
So my relationship with this movie and this franchise in particular is way different. So I got into horror, and I got into Halloween, and I got really into Texas Chainsaw Massacre, obviously, and everything that came before it. And this was one of those that I just never got around to seeing. And so, but it was the one that all my other horror buddies, everyone I know who loves horror, they're like, oh, this is the thing, it was always Michael and Jason and Freddy.
Right.
And that defined kind of the 70s and 80s, mainly the 80s with Freddy. And so I came into it being way more jaded. Like I wasn't as fresh, and I'd seen all the worst stuff that I've seen.
You saw Leatherface already.
Exactly. I've seen Leatherface.
That's pretty.
Exactly.
That goes somewhere.
But this one, so when I saw it, it didn't scare me, but I liked Freddy Krueger.
Yeah.
And the later ones, I didn't like those as much because he talks constantly and he's in the movie constantly, and it wasn't scary at all.
Yeah.
I mean, it's more of a joke later on.
Right.
But going back and rewatching this for the first time, and I don't know, maybe like 6 or 7 years, I forgot how scary he was in this one. Because I think of him and I think of the guy cracking jokes before he kills someone.
Yeah. And there's still some of that in here.
There is, for sure. But he's actually pretty scary. And the shit they did with his voice kind of freaked me out. I'm kind of an audiophile that way. And sounds really affect me.
Yeah.
So the way they did his voice kind of messed with my head. And the screeching of the knives on the boiler room walls, that kind of messed with me. But it really, I forgot how scary that he could be when they really tried. And Wes Craven did a great job with that.
I think this movie, and I agree, because as you get later into the franchise, and we won't cover too much into that.
Sure.
But it ties in. And the tie-in is two things. One is it starts to lose whatever power and essence that it had in the first one. And it almost becomes a parody
Right.
of something that's supposed to be scary.
It's super cool still because the kills
Super
are over the
fun.
top and he's a great character, but it's not scary.
The characterization of Krueger is next to none.
Right.
I think, and I know that we could probably battle on this, and I have some notes in here because I'm talking, where did this, I don't want to get into it too early, but where
Right.
does Krueger fall on the all-time horror
Oh, that's a good one.
characterization
That's a good
or the
one.
character build? But I think Craven, and knowing a little of the history, and I'm sure you know this too, he kind of leaves the franchise after the first one, then
Yeah.
comes back
He
into
dips
it.
his toe back into it. Yeah.
Yeah, later on. But this first one, when I'm looking at this movie, there's two things that I'm trying to process. One is it's really filmed beautifully.
Yeah, it is.
Now there's some things in there that don't hold up, but for the most part, on a broad stroke, from a technical perspective, the side of like the cinematography, the special effects,
Yep.
the way it's constructed, the directing, like you're mentioning Craven and his ability to kind of play with the camera and kind of make it and manipulate it into the character, like it's made really beautifully.
Yep.
And that still holds even after 30 plus years or 30 plus years later.
Absolutely. Absolutely. There's a couple shots of him where, and that was the other thing I liked about this is you don't really see him a whole lot. And when
Right.
he's there, he's silhouetted a lot, and you
Yeah, he
see
is.
like the burns,
Hidden figures.
but you don't really see him, and that was very effective. And they went the Jaws technique, and I think
Yeah.
that's how they should have just kept with that.
Yeah, because there's a couple scenes that do date. Now, as much
Right.
as I have admiration for it, there are a couple scenes. There's the scene where he's chasing after Tina
Yeah.
in the alleyway,
Yeah.
and he's doing
Yeah.
the weird kind of movement with his body. Do you know
Yep.
what I'm talking
Yeah,
about?
and his arms extend.
And his
really
arms
long.
extend really
Yep.
long, and it kind of dates it a little bit.
Sure.
And it almost falls on the side of campy.
Right.
And that's an interesting point too, because when you watch the movie, one scene can be real campy, like
Mm-hmm.
that one, and then the very next scene is quite frightening.
It doesn't ruin it at all.
No,
At all.
it doesn't set it up and go, oh, it's not believable.
Right.
The next scene, I can get into this deeper meaning of whatever it might be.
Right.
Right. And it's a little more scary than just this kind of campy shot of him kind of running
Right.
down the alleyway. Do you think, now I have a question for you, and we'll get into this, which is, there's a lot to pull from the movie if you're looking at theme and the meaning of it. Like, what's the subtext? What are we layering into the film? What is Craven really saying? There's a lot of stuff out there. You can read things.
Sure.
What's your take on that? And then I want to share mine a little bit.
There's two. There's the one that is kind of, I don't want to call it a trope, but it's present in most 80s horror films, and that's the whole budding sexuality of the teenagers.
It's overtly sexual.
Absolutely, without a doubt. But for me, it's more about being vulnerable, because there is no time where you are more vulnerable than when you are sleeping.
Interesting.
And that, like, to me, even like with my girlfriend, like I'll be sleeping in bed and I'm worried, like, am I making weird noises? Am I going to do, like I still, when we first dated, not so much anymore, but I still worry about
You
that
get
kind of
jaded
thing.
later on.
Yeah, exactly.
15 years into a marriage, and I'm like, what is
Yeah,
what's
exactly,
happening? I'm
yeah.
just sleeping like a log.
Exactly. But, and I don't know what I'm doing, and you also don't know what can happen to you. Like, even my daughter will run up and wake me up in the middle of the night. It scares the shit out of me, being like a little thing just standing right next to my bed.
Yeah.
Because that could have been anything.
Yeah.
Anything could have been happening to me, and I'm defenseless.
The other night, so in our hallway, it's dark during the night. We didn't put a nightlight in or anything. And I'm coming out of the bathroom, and before I come out the door, I actually turn the light off. And as I come out the door, I bump into something,
Oh.
and I almost throw a right hook. And it's my daughter, my 11-year-old daughter. She has to use the bathroom.
Yeah.
But I'm like, I'm amped up,
Right,
and it
right.
scares me.
Right.
And so I almost throw a right hook at her.
Oh, yeah.
So
yeah.
it's not being asleep, but the vulnerability of not knowing your surroundings.
Yes.
And I think they play into that quite well in the film, like just creating an atmosphere of uncertainty. Like
Right.
when Nancy falls into one scene would be, for example, when Nancy's at school, and this is even jumping a little forward in the storyline of the film, and Tina's already dead.
Yeah.
Right, and Nancy falls asleep at school on her
Mhm.
desk
Yep.
and wakes up in a dream state, and then sees Nancy and starts following. Like, it's the school still, but there's still uncertainty because we're watching Nancy kind of, go through the
Right,
hallways
right.
and then down to a cellar and then down to another room, and just there's uncertainty of where we are and what's going on.
It's a disorientation. And there's a lot of that in there, even with the fact that who you think is going to be the main character is killed off within the first, 15 minutes.
Yeah.
And then you're kind of stunned.
Does that fall into trope?
I don't know.
You're like we talked about before, like this is your wheelhouse.
Mm-hmm.
Like I love horror movies, but
Sure.
then there's another tier and you're part of that tier,
Sure,
that higher
sure.
tier. Is that it? When you watch it, you go, oh, Tina's who we're going to follow throughout the whole film.
Sure.
And then she's gone within, like you mentioned, the first 15 minutes.
Right.
Would you expect that, or do you?
I don't think so. And especially back when this came out, I don't think. I'm trying to think back on some of the old classics, like Halloween wasn't like that. So I don't think so. I don't think it's it kind of is now, or it could be overused, but I actually think it'd be more effectively used more often than it actually is nowadays. But so you're disorientated with that, and then there's this whole thing. Half the time you don't know, are they dreaming? Are they awake? Or what's going on? Like when she's, and this is again going later on, when she's asks Johnny Depp, and I can't remember his character's name because he's just
Glenn.
Glenn, that's right. When she asks him to do something for him.
I only remember that because my wife goes, look how cute he is.
And he was, man.
And I looked at her and I said, I concede.
Yeah.
He is cute.
He is. He's very cute. Yeah, exactly.
Sorry.
But you don't know what's going on because she's screaming for him. And it feels like she's in a dream when she's heading to the police station.
Right.
And she's screaming for him, but he pops out. So it's
he comes out of the tree.
Right.
Are you still there, Glenn? And he jumps out.
Right.
And you're like, wait, are they
Are they dreaming?
Are they dreaming or are this real?
Exactly. And there's a lot. I found myself, even having seen the movie, still questioning what was going on, if they're dreaming or not. So there's a lot of disorientation and a lot of that uncertainty. And I think it also plays into, these kids are adolescents, they're in high school, and there's a lot of uncertainty when you're in high school.
Yeah. I think that's a great cross connect, which is like, look, these kids are going through so many things. I think, if you get into the acting, what I found interesting about particularly was Nancy's character. And is it Heather Langenkamp?
Yes.
So Heather Langenkamp, played by Heather. When you watch, and you're talking about vulnerability, and you're talking about being in high school and the feelings that you have as a kid when you're 16, 17 years old. And I want to touch on that a little bit when it comes to the acting. Because as I'm watching the film, there were moments where I looked at Langenkamp's performance and I went, not very good.
Me too.
Not very good. What were your thoughts on that? Because I actually have something that I want to share and see what you think about it after you tell me what you thought about her performance.
Overall, I wasn't really sold, but it didn't really matter because it was more about the environment. And I mean, we kind of talked about this with some other films we talked about.
No, but that makes sense.
It just wasn't, I wasn't sold on her.
I wasn't either. And then I started thinking about it. And here's what I want to throw at you and see if this sticks.
Okay.
So I'm watching it going, yeah, her performance seems campy and it seems inauthentic.
Mm-hmm.
It doesn't seem real. It feels like she's an actor trying to portray a character.
Yes.
But then I started thinking about it, and we were talking about teenagers. I mean, this film is so nuanced with the idea of what it means to be a teenager in the world beyond horror films. And that's what's so great about this movie. It has so much subtext.
Right.
But I started thinking about it, and I go, well, what were you as a high school kid or a teenager? And for me, I thought, well, I remember, I'm trying to look back, and this has been 20 years.
Right.
So I'm trying to go, But I do remember how I acted, which was partly overconfident, but based in really insecurity.
Yes, absolutely.
So really it's like, I'm exuding this thing that everything's okay and I'm all right and it's fine. And I'm pretending to, do you know what I mean? I'm putting on a facade of I'm good, I'm cool, everything's good. But inside it's like, I'm none of these things I'm portraying.
Right, exactly.
And the reason I bring it up is because her acting could be really bad. or and I'm trying to give her the benefit of the doubt here because I love her as a character.
Yeah.
If you were looking at the character for the storyline.
Absolutely.
Or she's portraying a person who is exuding some kind of confidence because every response that she gives to her mother is always over the top.
That's right.
I'm fine, Mom. I'm good. And you know what I mean? And it's a little bit pushing it. And it's almost playing into that, at least that idea to a degree, which is maybe she's just she's acting as an overconfident teenager who really doesn't have any confidence.
That could be.
I mean, there's a little that
could be.
No?
I definitely think, especially when she's very assertive. I think you're right. When she's kind of taking control of the situation with her parents, I think she does that. By the way, her parents, especially her dad, good God, man, could you have a more callous, like her best friend was just murdered and her dad's yelling at her. It's just like, it made me so enraged. And I don't ever remember seeing that before when I saw this movie.
Yeah, because now you're a parent. And
Yeah,
so you look at it and you go, what a dick.
Yeah, I can't,
You know?
I would never.
No, not in a million years.
Yeah.
And also I think Craven's talking to some extent about that in the terms of
Sure.
oblivious parenting.
Right.
Do you know what I mean?
Yes.
Letting kids just go do without having at least any responsibility to try to rear or help them or
Right.
have them confide in you in
Right.
some way. And I think he's talking about that overarching role of parenthood and their oblivious nature.
Sure.
They're very, actually, when I look at Nancy's father and mother, they're narcissists.
Totally.
They only care
Totally.
about themselves.
Yep.
Her mother's a drunk. Her dad's obsessed with work, could care less about her or what's happening to her. Uses her as a pawn
Yep.
to get what he wants, when he goes after Rod, because
Yep.
they think Rod killed Tina. So yeah, the parenting in this, but I think that's Craven. That's the other subtext, which is great, because then Craven's talking about like, a world of like how parents can be, for lack of a better word, and like oblivious. They can just
Exactly. And then there's the opposite where the mother locks her in the house and puts her in danger because she goes overboard. She realizes that she's been a little too oblivious, way too oblivious. And so then she locks the house down.
And it's almost
She's
comically done though.
Right.
Because she comes back and there's bars on the window.
Right.
And you're right. She takes it from not caring at all to the extent of like, what the fuck are you doing?
Right. Exactly.
Because you're putting bars on. And then she comes in and she's drunk.
Yep.
And Nancy's trying to get out.
Yep.
And she's like, locked.
Yep,
And you're
yep.
just like, this bitch is crazy.
She's insane. Exactly.
Right?
Yeah.
So, but I think Craven's speaking to that a little bit too, which is that subtext of parenting.
Oh, for sure.
You know?
For sure.
And then you can take that same concept and look at the driving plot of the film, which is Krueger returns in these children's dreams.
Yep.
And Krueger was killed by these children's parents. Do you
Yeah.
know what I mean? So
Yep.
like the kids are responsible for the things that their parents did.
Right. They're paying for the
They're
sins
paying
of the parents,
the comment.
right.
Yeah. The theme of like, they're paying for the sins of the parents.
Right.
Yeah. And that's tied in there too. right?
Absolutely.
So, a lot of things. I mean, it's like, there's a lot of stuff.
It's a lot deeper than you would expect, actually.
That's why I think I love it so much. Because once
Yeah.
again, we were talking about this before, but like for me, you're in that wheelhouse of horror where that's your genre. And I
Right.
love these films that like really try to push me intellectually and get me thinking and stimulated in a
Sure,
different way.
sure.
And even as something as common and just kind of and other horror movies do this as well.
Absolutely.
And that's the greatest thing. That's why I do love them, because they carry like this big surface 30,000 foot level
Right.
idea. And it's just like, oh, it's massacre and it's slasher and
Right.
it's this, but there's like darker subtexts going
The
on.
best ones always have some sort of subtext, and they're trying to send a message.
And
for
I think
sure.
this one definitely carries that quite
Absolutely.
well. And that's pretty good. I think that covers a lot of like the meaning, at least to the
Yeah.
personalization of it,
For sure.
like the interpretation of the meaning. Tell me like, what's a scene that resonates? Like, is there something, it could be good or bad. Like, oh, that we talked about him in the alleyway, but like a scene that you go, that was fucking awesome. Or a scene that you go, nah.
Well, the first one, we're talking about hasn't aged very well, was when he cuts off his finger,
Yeah.
and he's got just that dumb look on his face. And
He even delivers a dumb line.
Exactly. But that's one that sticks out for bad. Good. I mean, that bed scene where Johnny Depp is swallowed up still holds up as one of the best kills I've ever seen, ever.
Holy shit.
And even Tina's death.
Tina's death is amazing.
For a 1984 movie, I still am blown away by it.
Those two murder scenes, slasher scenes,
Yeah.
I mean, just like,
Unbelievable.
I just watched Tina's death going, holy shit, it's 2019 and
I-
I'm still going, so good.
It holds up. It absolutely holds up. It's still scary as hell.
Now, do you know how they technically did it? Did you do any research?
Yeah,
into it?
yeah.
Tell me about what you researched.
They
'cause I
have
researched it.
the big room, right, where they
Yeah.
flip it around.
Right, they bolt everything down and then they flipped it, right?
Yeah.
So the actors were and then they could film it upside down.
Right.
But it looks so good.
It does. I mean, even when she's kind of like on the wall and then she's on the ceiling, and it doesn't look like she's being jostled. It looks like
No.
she's just kind of being thrown around by a guy.
Yeah.
It's crazy.
Yeah. And that scene is it's pretty dark.
It is.
Beyond the sense of someone being brutally murdered.
Right.
Like, we know that's dark, but then there's like that, once again, that overt sexuality to
Yes.
it. Of like, if you're talking something on a more serious tone, it's rapey.
Absolutely.
You know?
Absolutely. I mean, I think he cuts right down her shirt, right?
Right.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, very.
It goes into some stuff that becomes...
It's uncomfortable.
That's what I was going to say. It becomes uncomfortable, right? Which is Krueger's, his motive. That's his thing. Is that, you know, he's a murderer. And
exactly.
There's always talk about Krueger being like a pedophile and like...
Right.
And I think some research I did, actually Craven originally wrote him as a pedophile.
Oh, really?
Yeah, and that was part of, and what had happened was there was something in the news topically during the time before they started filming, and then he pulled it back.
Okay.
So he had originally conceptually thought of it, and my research could be off, but this is what I researched, that Krueger was a pedophile, and the parents killed him based on the pedophilia.
Which is a very understandable thing. I mean, I would want to do the same thing.
That brings a whole nother level to it.
Exactly. Well, I think they went with that in the remake. If I remember, I've seen the remake and it's not very good, but I think they did go with that
in the 2010
aspect.
release.
Yeah.
I haven't seen that one.
You can't have anyone else as Freddy Krueger.
Yeah, because they changed it up and put someone else.
Yeah,
in.
You just can't.
No, it's got to be Robert Englund.
It has to be.
Yeah,
it has to be.
Yeah, and so that, going back to that idea of like of Krueger being a pedophile, makes it even more dark and even more disturbing. Yep. Now, they changed it up, and of course, in the storyline of the movie, he's disclosed as a child murderer.
Right.
But then they also talk about him like taking the kids down into a broiler room, and so there's insinuation there.
Absolutely.
I mean, it's still pretty dark.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So it's funny. It's not funny, but it's interesting because then the parents, despite the murder or the pedophilia, like there's justification in what they did.
Sure.
When I think of it as a parent, I'm like, yeah, I'd kill that guy too.
No qualms about it.
I'm going to murder him in my...
Exactly.
I'm in the same boat.
We're going to burn him alive.
That's right.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so he's a deeply disturbing character.
Absolutely.
Krueger is.
Absolutely.
You know?
And I think that's why I have a harder time when he becomes kind of a comic relief character. Not comic relief, but he becomes a comedic character in the later installments. And because he really is dark. I mean, when you think about what he's done and why they killed him, it's bad, man. It's bad. Like, it's not funny.
Yeah, like I recall a lot from Nightmare 3, which is Dream Warrior. That one seems to stand out for me. And there's just a whole bunch of, as they're in the psych ward and all this stuff. And like, of course, the one that stands out is when he's in the television room and he comes down and he's like, prime time, bitch. He said that's still funny, actually.
It's still a great kill.
Like, it's still a great kill.
Right.
And like, actually, it's a great line.
It's a great line.
Like, prime time, bitch, you know? But you're right. It's funny if you look at Krueger in the first one. I don't see him in that same light that I saw him, like you were mentioning, in the later films.
Right.
And I think they got away from who he is as a core character, which is deeply dark and disturbing.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Tell me a little bit about. So those are good. Those are some good scenes. Is there a particular line of dialogue that stands out that you're like, oh, that's hilarious? Or it's just good writing. Like, for me as a filmmaker, it might even be, I'll give you an example. And there's one where at the beginning of the film, it's Tina and it's Nancy and Glenn and Rod. And it's an example of just funny writing, and me and my wife both laughed at it. And they're going to school, and Rod comes up.
I already know what you're gonna say.
And he's like, "I had a heart on this morning when I woke up, Tina. Had your name written all over it." And then Tina goes, "There's 4 letters in my name, Rod. How can there be enough room on your joint for 4 letters?"
Oh my God.
And we just started laughing.
Well, so I had a question about that, actually. So later on, it's talked about that Rod and Tina had a fight. Was that the fight? Because they were pissed off at each other. Was that the fight they had? Because then he gets really upset and he says, "Screw you with something lawn, like a..." Yeah,
because then he said, "Up yours with a twirling lawnmower."
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
I guess that's the fight. I can't recall off the top of my... Because then later on when they're at Tina's house and he comes and Rod sneaks up and he's like, "Hey,
Yeah.
And they go into the... Maybe that was the fight.
Maybe. I don't know.
I don't recall seeing anything else.
Me neither.
Or having any exposition on what they said.
Exactly.
So, but I think that line just stood out to me. I thought it was funny.
Yeah, I thought it was great.
I
thought it was great.
What about a favorite? Do you have a favorite line or one that... I have a Krueger line that I think is great, but I'll let you go with yours first.
So it's a very Krueger thing, but it's when she's on the phone and he goes, "I'm your boyfriend now,"
Yeah.
and then the tongue comes out. And I know it's coming,
Yeah.
but it gets me every time.
Yeah.
It's hilarious, but also at the same time, you think that'd be terrifying.
Yeah.
But it's just a very Krueger thing to say and do.
Right. Yeah, that's a great line. And that particular scene too with the special effects. I mean,
Yeah.
does it hold up? Did it hold up in that scene? The tongue comes out of the phone.
I think they cut away from it just in time for it to still be somewhat believable.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'm always I think what I like about some of the lines, like of course the one we mentioned with Rod, like there's so much sexuality in the film.
Yeah.
So I love that he plays into that. And then there's this one line from Glenn who's wanting to, he's Nancy's boyfriend, but they're very straight-laced.
Right.
And there's a line where all he says is morality sucks.
Yeah. Yeah, because he's hearing them having sex.
Because he's
in the
hearing
other
that, that's
room.
what
Right.
it is. And he hears
Yeah.
Rod in there and he's like,
Yeah.
morality sucks.
Yeah.
You know, and I just think he plays what Craven does so well is he builds the world of the teenage
Yep.
high school experience and the dynamics between people and relationships and
Yep.
kids at that age so well.
Yeah, I agree.
So that line always stood out to me. Another one from Nancy, which is like she's looking in the mirror after she's aged going through the dream, and she's like, "I look 20 years old." You know?
I remember listening to that, being like, "Oh, you got to be kidding me!"
I know, it's funny.
Kill for that.
So, talk a little bit about what's your takeaway on. We talked a little bit about the technical shots, the special effects a little bit. How do they hold up? Let's go a little deeper maybe on the special effects or anything that you think either holds up or doesn't quite hold value in today's standards.
I love practical effects, and I know back then that was the only choice they had, but that's what I love about old horror movies is going back and seeing the practical effects. The digital stuff just doesn't do it for me.
It doesn't carry the same visceral.
It really doesn't.
Of it.
And even the bad practical effects in movies are still better than most digital effects. So I'm a sucker for those. So I loved like I said, I love the tongue. And the one that did not hold up at all though is when the mother was being sucked into the bed and she just sticks up her arm.
Yeah.
That did not hold up.
So that's it doesn't hold up. It's very, you can tell it's some kind of just normal mold of a skeleton.
Yes.
You know, and then the arm has no real animation to it. It's just kind of like this.
Exactly. Just,
you know, like giving
what is a board? Stiff as a
Heil
board.
Hitler sign.
Yeah, exactly.
It's like a
exactly.
weird, weird thing. But that doesn't hold up well. But let's talk about that scene quickly, because there's a lot of, for me, I'm trying to interpret some of the ending, which is like, it's almost like, when do we come out of the dream? Or
right.
When does it end? Or what's the resolute ending to this thing that Nancy's going through with this guy in her dreams? Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Because mom dies. Dad was there. He witnessed it. Did he not? Or
he did. And his reaction was just
his reaction. So I'm wondering, when does Nancy actually come out of the dream? Or does she ever? And that's how we end it.
Well, and that's the question. And this is, again, the whole disorienting part of this movie is, was she dreaming did she really even bring him into the real world?
Is this one whole dream?
Exactly.
From beginning to end?
That's a good point, because you think she brings him back into the real world, and then you think it's over with the whole, I take back all the power I gave you, all the energy. But then they get in the car, and his sweater is the roof of the convertible. It closes, and then the mom sucked through the door.
Which that effect doesn't hold up either.
No, not at all.
So any effect with the mom's getting is
Exactly.
bad. Because the last one, it looks like a rubber doll.
Totally.
Or a plastic doll.
Totally,
Yeah.
exactly. So I don't know if she is even out of the dream at all. And I don't remember the later installments good enough. I know she comes back, I think, in the third one.
Yeah, she's not in 2.
She's not in 2.
Which deserves its own podcast.
Yeah. Oh my God. The subtext in that one.
Talk about subtext in movies. But she does come back not in 4. She doesn't come back till later. Because in 3 is Dream Warriors with Arquette.
Right.
What's her name?
I
just went blank. But
Patricia Arquette.
Yeah. And then in 4, it's not Heather Langenkamp.
Right. I know she's in New Nightmare.
Yeah.
But that's kind of a different entity in itself.
Is that where he came back to the director's seat?
Yeah, and he makes a cameo in it, and man, he's horrible.
Yeah,
he can't act.
But he can sure as hell make a good story.
Yeah, he can.
So
I don't know, and I don't know if it tells how she survived, or if she survived in the later movies. I don't know. So I tend to think that she never woke up from the dream that she put herself in to bring Krueger out. Remember, she set the alarm on her watch. I think she's still in that dream.
In the New Nightmare, but that's a whole, you would consider that a whole reinstallment, right?
Yes.
It's not attached in the sense of storyline to the first one. Is that?
It is.
Because I can't remember either off the top of my head.
It basically, Freddy Krueger comes into the real world. They're working on the new Nightmare on Elm Street movie.
That's what it is.
And he comes into the real world.
Right.
So she's playing herself, actually. She's playing Heather Langenkamp, who is playing Nancy.
That's
if that
right.
makes sense. It's super meta.
Yeah. That's super. That's
yeah.
Craven's going meta out.
And he brought Freddy back to scary in that one too.
Yeah, he does.
Very
I do remember
scary,
that.
yeah.
It's more raw.
Exactly.
Well, that's interesting because I'm still confused, and I'll admittedly say that. Somebody who watches films and makes films and studies films, like I'm confused, and I don't know if that was part of Craven's, desire or his what he wanted to leave us as, because it was like a dream, and then there was another dream, and then the
Right.
ending out, they came out of it, and so I don't know if she ever came out of the dream or it was all one big dream, and I'm still trying to kind of dissect it and figure out where I want to put myself
right.
in that situation. So
I love the not happy ending though. I'm a sucker in horror films when they.
Yeah, I like that it doesn't just end on like, hey, these people survived and we're all happy, and then like I do like that, like in the sense that when you first watch it, you look at her going out and meeting her friends, and you're like, oh, her friends are.
Yeah.
I don't like that. I agreed. And then, so leaving it up for some form of interpretation is kind of nice.
Yeah, I agree. Leaves you thinking.
He definitely does that. Tell me about how does it hold up as a genre, as a horror genre? Now, if you're thinking about, the 70s and 80s and horror films being made, like there's something they're like pioneers.
Right.
Of this genre. You have the middle to late 70s going into the 80s and all these great horror films, the Carpenter films, Texas Chainsaw, Halloween, those kind of films. And even Craven has built horror films before this. This is not his first go at it.
Right.
But I don't think his other ones hold up the same way as this do.
Yeah, I agree.
Last House on the Left and those kind of films, they just don't carry the same strength that something like this does. How does it hold up as a genre film?
Oh, I'm not the biggest Wes Craven fan.
Yeah.
I don't dislike his films, but I just never really bought into he's this horror god type of thing. But when it comes to most 70s and 80s classics, when you look back, they don't typically hold up very well. They usually, like, you go back and look at Halloween. It's one of my favorite movies ever, but it's pretty boring for most of it. I think only 3 people get killed in the whole movie, or 4, something like that. So they don't always hold up, but we still hold them on high regard because they're the pioneers.
Yeah.
This one, and I kind of, before I went back and rewatched this film, I kind of felt the same way. But now that I rewatched it, it actually holds up a lot better than I expected it would. A lot better.
I think it holds up. Going back to this, I think it holds up because it's shot so well.
Yes.
I think the cinematography
I think you're right.
is beautiful.
I think you're right.
For like almost all of it.
Yep.
And also the scenes, we talked about the two with Tina dying and with Glenn dying. Those are fantastic. But like just little things, like I'll go back to this again because the school scene where she wakes up and sees Nancy in the body bag.
Yeah.
Like it's just the way it's scary.
That's very scary.
Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And then she follows her and then bumps into the hall pass person. And then before you know, and the hall pass girl has the sweater on, turns around and does the little thing with
God, just the little touches.
But she's dressed as a normal kid that's a hall pass monitor. And she's got the claws on and she's like, hey, that shit's spooky. And I think that's what he does good at, because there's little things like that are kind of in there all the way through. That those little things that they're not like over the top, in your face slasher moments, but those little things that to me make it creepy.
Right. I agree. And I think that's really the best part of this movie is just the atmosphere is so thick. Like it's just, when you're in that world, it is scary.
Yeah, it's a dream.
And there's nothing
it's a
you
nightmare.
can do. Right. And there's nothing you can do. And the worst part about knowing that there is this guy who lurks in your sleep is you have to sleep. You can try and stay awake and drink all the coffee you want. You can do that, but you're going to fall asleep at some point, and then you're done. And that, to me, that there's something terrifying about something you just cannot escape at all.
You can't escape it. Yeah. And it's everyone's susceptible to it. It's something that everyone has to do, and you can't escape it.
Right.
Yeah, it's frightening. It's scary. It's scary.
Yeah. And
the concept.
That's why I think it holds up a lot better than I originally thought, for sure.
Yeah. So there's a special effects scene that does stand out for me, which I think is just really well put together, and it's real. And this goes again to not being over the top, but just being subtle. And I think those little subtleties, those scenes that they create, we were just talking about, really help amp it up. And it's the scene where Nancy's in the bathroom, in the tub.
Yep. Yep.
And it's like, that's it wasn't probably simple to film. It probably took a lot of...
I'm still trying to figure out how they did that.
So here's what I read, and I don't know, once again, your research on the internet could be all over the place. But after I watched it, I was like, how the hell did they make that look so good? Because just talking about that subtext in that scene, I mean, she's naked in a bathtub and the claw comes up between her legs.
Right.
And you're like, and it's spooky and overtly sexual.
Right.
But then I was like, how did they do that? What's the technical approach to doing this? And this is what I read, and whether it's right or not, I don't know. But what they ended up doing was building a 3-wall set over a pool.
Oh my God.
Right? So they built the set around the pool, the bathroom set.
Right.
And then they have an endless 8-foot tub, because they can just build the tub, have it bottomless, right? Have a guy in scuba gear, in a scuba suit.
Oh my God.
Then they can pull her down all the way.
Right.
And also have the ability to bring the hand up through the tub.
That is just the extent that they went to.
I love it.
For some of these shots. And that's just like one little scene in this thing.
One little scene.
Where, I mean, the big deaths for Tina and for Glenn, I can understand that, because those are big events, but this is just one little scene.
This is one thing, but that's what I mean. And I think that's what Craven does so well, and is those subtleties.
Yeah.
And that's what makes it creepy for me. That's what makes it feel real and feel visceral.
Right.
Like the over-the-top deaths, blood, and that's fun.
Right.
Because that's what we want to see when we go to a horror movie.
Exactly.
But like the little subtleties help amp those up even more.
That's my favorite part of every horror movie, is when you can effectively have those little moments where you're just creeped out. It's not necessarily terrifying, but it's just you're creeped out. It makes your skin crawl. That's what I look for in a horror movie.
Yep, 100%. Where do you... Now, you kind of mentioned this a little earlier, in being the horror expert, or the horror, it's your thing. Where does it fall if in all time? It's a big ranking. It's like, okay, there's a lot of things going on, a lot of horror films. There's new contemporary films. You have new filmmakers,
right? People
like Jordan Peele or whoever it is, and then you have all the classics,
right?
So you have an affinity for things. You just like things where people like different things. We just like perspectively like different things. I'm curious where for you it falls if you had to rank it in a top 10.
Ooh, that's a good question.
I'll distinguish it into two parts.
Okay.
One is character. So villain, monster.
Okay.
Right? So let's start there.
He's definitely got to be top 2. I wouldn't have put that before rewatching it at all.
What would you put before him?
I'm super biased, but Leatherface is my favorite.
We'll get into that next cast.
And when we talk about that, I'll tell you exactly why he's my favorite. Michael Myers would have been second, but I think Freddy's personality, and also like you said, the way they shot him, and just the way he looks terrifying.
He does.
He looks scarier than Jason. What makes Michael Myers scary is that there's no expression. And there's nothing there, and it's like a soulless...
The void.
Exactly. Where Freddy's just the opposite, where there's almost too much there. It's like the uncanny valley. It's just like, this is disturbing just to look at him.
He's grotesque. He's ugly.
Yeah. He's
also a little over the top in his personality.
Yep.
And once again, the idea of who he is as a human, or who he was as a person. And that's the other thing I like about his story, is we do have some exposition. So we like we talked about before, he's a pedophile, he's a murderer. So we don't like him immediately, because we already know who he is.
Exactly.
And so then when you add on the quote unquote mask, in his case, the claws and the face, you're like, man, this dude's spooky and creepy, and I don't like him at all.
Yeah, and that's why I think he's terrifying. He really, and then you add on the whole fact that he comes in your dreams.
Yeah.
You're so vulnerable when you're sleeping, and it's his world, and you can't get out unless you get lucky and someone wakes you up or something. You can't get out. And so to me, that's what makes him so scary. So I put him I'd put him 2.
Put him on 2 on the ranking.
2, yeah.
And so I'm going to come in hot with the number 1 because, and we'll get into this with Texas Chainsaw next time, but for me, for the many reasons that you explained, like, I just think there's so much subtext and so much deep layering to who Freddy is. We know his history, and he's dark and disturbing. And for me also, what's interesting is we play between 2 worlds. So like, a lot of times in horror films, it's all just happening and transpiring in real time in the sense of that moment in that world for that character. And the thing about Freddy is the disorientation of like, is it real? Is it not? Is it? And that feeling of, in a sense, vulnerability and not knowing what world we're playing in. Like that to me makes it spookier.
It's terrifying.
It's terrifying. So I throw him just because of those. And then the things you mentioned, I'll throw him down as a ranking of 1.
I like it.
Yeah.
I like it.
What about, so the other part to that question is in terms of horror franchises, where does it fall? And we talked about this a little because some of the other sequels to this particular one kind of start to fall off the map a little bit, but coming back into it, where do you sit with in comparison to like something like the Halloween franchise or something like I'm trying to think of
Friday the 13th.
Friday the 13th,
right.
Of course, yeah.
Well, I think as far as a franchise go, when you look at the whole thing, because having sequels suck is nothing new for horror movies. That's kind of how it is. They find their cash cow and they milk it for everything it's worth. But I think this is a really solid franchise. Even when it gets super campy and comedic, it's not as good, but it's still fun. Halloween's sequels are terrible. Almost all of them are terrible.
Even Zombies?
Rob
Zombies?
Well, his Halloween 2 was god-awful. It was one of the worst movies
Did
I've
you
ever
like
seen.
the first one he did?
I actually did like it.
Yeah, I did too.
And I'm not a huge Rob Zombie fan, but I actually really did like it a lot. The new one's fantastic. I love the new one.
The one that came out like a couple years ago?
Exactly. Yeah. And I'm going to say objectively the Halloween movies, the sequels are pretty bad, but I make no bones about it. I love them.
Yeah.
Like I absolutely love Halloween 4 and 5 and 6. They're the most hated ones in all of horror, but I love them.
What about Halloween? Is it 3? Witches? What's it called?
Oh, Season of the Witch.
Season of the Witch.
Yeah. I love it.
You do?
It.
Oh my gosh.
When you look at it as
Really?
its own film, when you don't go in thinking it's a Halloween film, it's actually pretty solid.
I'll have to view it again with that lens.
It's pretty solid.
Because I watched that going, what the hell's happening?
Yeah, and that's what everyone did. They're like, there's no Michael Myers. What the hell's going on?
That's what and so that's what I mean. So in Halloween, that's a good point, because in Halloween they actually take the primary character out of it, at least for the third one.
Right.
That character is completely gone. And with Freddy, you can't do that.
No. Well, they wanted what
How
John
would you do
Carpenter
it?
wanted to do is he wanted to turn Halloween into an anthology series where every year they release a new movie with a different story.
Gotcha.
That's what he wanted to do.
So his approach to it was like, let me recreate this as an anthology. So,
yeah.
Okay.
But people were so pissed off about it, not having Michael Myers, that they had to bring it back for the next one.
Interesting.
And then 4, 5, and 6 were just shot here in Salt Lake City. So
yeah,
that's
I
pretty
remember
cool.
that. Yeah. And I used to drive by Vincent Drug all the time.
Yeah, exactly.
And always go, hey, that's Halloween 4.
Exactly. Yeah. So as far as franchises, I gotta say, I would rank it near the top, if not the top. The Texas Chainsaw really doesn't have a franchise.
Right.
Friday the 13th is pretty solid.
I mean, they did reboots of Texas Chainsaw, and we'll get into that.
Yeah, and they've done reboot. The reboot was great.
There was 2. There was a 2.
There was a 2, and which is a totally different movie.
Because that's Dennis Hopper in there.
Dennis Hopper. That's a horror comedy. Like
that's what I was gonna say.
And Toby Hooper still did it. It's hilarious.
Yeah.
It's great. But as far as solid franchises, I'd say this might be number 1.
I'm gonna go with you on that, and I say the thing that might rival it would be Halloween, just because of, Friday the 13th's good, but it's so modular, like everything's the exact. I mean, so are these two, but like Friday the 13th is like
it's by the numbers.
It's by the numbers, 100%. There's no deviation from what they're doing.
Right, exactly.
And so the only reason I would put it above that, and then maybe Halloween, is just because of, once again, I'll fall back to, I think you have one of the strongest or most well built as a filmmaker villains or monsters.
Yeah, I agree. I totally agree.
So I'm going to throw it. I'm just like, I feel like today, in some sense, I'm being a Wes Craven / Nightmare apologist.
No,
and I just
think
like
it's good.
fucking going in for all the highest rankings with this
Well,
film.
it's funny because before rewatching this, I never would have ranked it as high as I am. But rewatching this, I'm like, this actually holds up.
It does.
Because my girlfriend and I were gonna do. She's never seen the Friday the 13th movies, and I haven't seen all of them, and I've seen most of them,
Right.
and we're gonna rewatch them, and I already know it's not gonna hold up. Like it's gonna be. I've seen the first couple. It's gonna be shitty.
Yep.
And I also think Halloween should get points for being. Halloween 6 was the first film Paul Rudd ever did, so I think we gotta bump them up a little bit for that.
Halloween 6 is?
Halloween 6, yeah.
We love Paul. I love Paul
It's a
Rudd.
terrible movie. But
You love Paul Rudd?
Oh, I love
Who
Paul Rudd.
doesn't?
Yeah,
So yeah,
exactly.
we'll give it some extra points
Yeah,
for Paul Rudd.
exactly.
So a couple stats
Okay.
on the film that I find interesting. Some things that that I was curious about. Going back to the release. So the film's released in November, actually, of 1984.
Interesting.
So produced or financed and distributed by New Line Cinema,
Mm-hmm.
who up to that point was just a distribution company, and then took a chance, got a bunch of people to invest in it, and the film actually got passed on by most studios when the script was going around. They were like, it doesn't seem like our
Sure.
wheelhouse. Got it picked up. Robert Shea, the executive at New Line, picks it up. They produce it for $1.8 million. Okay.
Wow.
So not a whole lot of money. And we hear that go, oh, that's a lot of money. Not really when it comes
Right.
to filmmaking. That's not a whole lot of money.
Especially when you consider the sets they had to build.
The things that they did. And that's
Right.
what goes back to this, man, the technical shots they did and the way they put this thing
Unreal.
together for
Unreal.
that is amazing. I will say, by the way, on that note, the stairs case is a little
Yeah,
off.
that one doesn't hold up.
That doesn't hold up. So released in 1984, and then went on to gross over, I think it was over $30 million. So it did really well.
In November. Wow.
Not just all-time box office.
All-time.
But that's huge.
Yeah.
I mean, those returns are amazing. And so when we talk about franchises, like when you look at it now, New Line Cinema is the house that Freddie built. That's
Yep.
what everyone calls it.
Yep.
Because up to that point, they were a fledgling, struggling company.
Yep.
And then they made this film that everyone went to, and it got huge box office returns, and it basically built that company.
Yep.
So Freddie built that house by himself.
Put it all on the shoulders of Robert Englund.
Put it all on the shoulders of Robert Englund, who is, by the way, let's talk about his performance, is amazing.
He's outstanding.
Now, there's a couple things that I had a problem with, which was his stature and the way that he moved in a couple shots, not every shot.
Mm-hmm.
His performance as someone who's scary and evil, great.
Right.
Like, and also, once again, falling back to this idea, like overtly sexual, like it's creepy.
Right. Right.
But like, there's a couple moments where he has weird kind of movements. That's the one thing that I didn't like about Freddy, which is like he's not mobile. He's
No.
not athletic.
Right. Right.
Do you know what I mean?
Right.
Like, and not in a way that Michael Myers, just is going to walk the way he walks.
Exactly.
He's going to be slow.
Right.
And the one thing I was hoping for is and I couldn't remember, but now watching it again, I went, oh, like Freddy's not really agile.
No, not at all.
And I was
He's
hoping
always getting his ass kicked.
He's always getting his ass kicked. Is that a good thing to be vulnerable as a character like that?
You know what? That might be a Wes Craven thing because you look at Scream.
They're a little clumsy.
Yeah, very clumsy. They're always just getting beat down by these teenage girls.
Like it. And by the way, and speaking on this, like, did we know that Nancy was the first Kevin McAllister?
Right? Yeah, she home alone the entire house.
She home alone the house.
Oh my god!
Because I was watching it, going, wait a minute, I thought Kevin did this first.
Exactly. Well, then I'm thinking, you know what? Didn't Jonathan Landis direct Home Alone, or no? Was it?
No,
Jonathan
it was.
Landis? I can't remember who it was.
I think it was Chris Columbus.
Chris Columbus. That's right. I was thinking, did they steal? Because some of the shots are
That's
remarkably
exactly what I
similar.
thought. Is Chris Columbus stealing Craven's shots?
Exactly.
Like the sledgehammer getting pulled up in the little what is it? The trip wire.
The tripwire, like
And
it's the same shot of
100%.
when Kevin McAllister's.
I'm
pulling
like,
up a
Nancy's
tripwire.
the OG Kevin McAllister.
Exactly.
Is his name Kevin McAllister?
Yeah, it is.
Okay, I just want to make sure I was saying it right. Otherwise, it'd be a fucking dumb thing for me to say. But I was laughing at that. The booby traps
That was
thing.
hilarious.
Oh my gosh, the booby traps. If you guys are listening, watch it. Watch for that scene and be like, "That's OG Kevin."
It's
right there.
so it's kind of absurd in the sense just in the context of the film.
But that's the other thing. And we go back to this, but it's like, is it a dream or is that happening?
Right.
And why
right.
is she doing, like, booby traps don't make sense.
He's
and
a
then,
dream monster.
although I love the shot where she brings him out and then runs out the door,
Yeah.
and then he runs through and hits the tripwire and the sledgehammer comes down and hits him in the gut, and he's
my
like,
God.
oh.
It's perfect. It's perfect. He's a dream monster. That's not even going to hurt him. It's not going to phase him.
Right. This is a technicality,
Yeah.
right? Because if they're still in the dream,
Good point.
like, would that affect his movement?
No,
would he be
I
affected
wouldn't
by
think
a
so.
sledgehammer?
No, he walked through the prison bars.
So this is why fucking Craven is messing with my head.
Yeah.
Because are we still out of the, okay.
I wonder if he even knew.
I don't know. I have no idea. I'm sure they always have their thoughts behind it. Quickly, one of the things that stands out too is the music of the film.
Mm-hmm.
And talk about the music, because when you're talking about horror films, music's of utmost importance.
Right.
Now, music's of utmost importance in any film or anything that
Sure.
you do, but horror films in particular. I mean, you could technically categorize Jaws as a horror film.
Absolutely.
So, and the music is what builds that. Without the music,
yeah.
and even the beautiful shots and the selections that Spielberg gets, without that music, it's not going to draw in.
Same, right.
There's the theme song of Nightmare, to me, I love it.
I do too. The first time I heard it, and again, this is kind of the context of how I came into Nightmare again, is I had seen every other horror film first. So the first time I saw it, it almost sounded like they were trying to get that horror score. But the longer I've kind of been exposed to it, the more I really enjoy it. I think it's perfect. I think it's
fits.
perfect.
It fits
really
really
does.
well. And then when beyond just the tie-in then to the children's song, the 1-2, that then elevates the creepiness of
Before I ever even watched this movie, I knew that song by heart, the jump rope song.
That always
I grew up with that.
Exactly. And when we go back to that time when I was 6-7 years old and I watched this for the first
God.
time unknowingly,
I can't imagine as a 6 or 7
that
year old.
song has never left my head. 1, 2, Freddy's coming for you. And I'm like, oh shit.
Yeah.
That first little line is all you need. And as a 7-year-old going, shit, Freddy's coming for me.
Oh my God. Just terrifying. I can't imagine.
I'm telling you, Alan,
I can't imagine.
it's still to this day. I did it. I got through it by myself,
Good job.
but I'm just saying.
So how many times do you think you've seen this movie?
So I've seen this film, and like I said, I have a weird obsession with it. It's almost like a trauma. When you go through trauma,
Yes.
and then it fucks with you.
Absolutely.
And so whatever that meant when I was 6-7 years old and I watched this, I have a weird obsession with wanting to watch it all the time.
Yeah. I know exactly what you're talking about.
So I've seen this movie a lot of times. And I can't count them on two hands. I mean,
Right.
15, 20 times.
Sure.
Maybe more, because I watch it. It's almost like I watch it every year.
Sure.
So, and I'm now 38. So yeah, I just, a weird obsession with it. I've seen it a lot of times. I think Craven really does well with the film overall.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's, once again, I'm going to sound like a film apologist.
Sure.
I think it's beautifully made. And
I think so too.
barring those little things that we've already discussed, like if you look at it as a whole, the story is crisp.
Mm-hmm.
The confusion is real.
Yep.
The back and forth between, is it real, is it not? This verisimilitude of idea of like, is this a real thing happening? And is it surreal, or is it mixed, or
Right.
what's a hybrid? Like, where are we in this world? But that confusion plays into the story really well.
Yep.
And I thought he did beautifully at that. I think his subtext is deep and dark. When we talked about that, I think the subtext to me makes it creepier. I think the monster, the villain, is up there in the top 2.
Yep.
And so I think, aside from giving so much praise to Craven, I think the film's just really, really fun to watch and really, elegantly for a horror film made.
Yeah. I think he hit it. I think I totally agree.
And the parents are fucking stupid.
It's so stupid.
And I think he's playing into that. So like we talked about. So a couple things on, we do this each podcast, and it's, once again, I always remind the listeners that it's not really because I care about ratings.
Right.
I just don't give a shit.
Right.
But I do it to give some form of context to where we think the movie falls. I think we've already praised it quite a bit. But I want to read through a couple of the ratings. So the ratings for the film, Rotten Tomatoes has the film at 94% from the critics.
That surprises me.
94% for the critics, 83% for the audience.
Interesting.
So I always look at this and go, who's right? In my perspective, this is how I base my decision. And I'm going with the critics.
Yeah, I think so too. And I wonder if it has to do with a lot of the set pieces that they built and the technicality of making some of those kills.
Yeah, because when you're a film enthusiast or a critic or someone who's a film buff,
right,
there's always an underlying appreciation for knowing how they did it.
Exactly.
And feeling like obligated to congratulate them for an achievement well done in technicality.
Yep. Exactly.
IMDb has it at 7.5 out of 10. And let's see, Metacritic has it at 76%. Google users, 91% liked the movie. So I say to you, where does this fall for you? If you have to assign it a rating, where are you going to put it? We're going to go 1 out of 10, keep it basic, simple. Where do you fit?
As a horror fan, I'm going to put it up there. I'm a pretty tough grader, but I would give it, I'm going to give it a solid 8.
That's pretty good.
Yeah.
That's pretty solid.
Yeah.
And once again, almost every podcast we've done up to this point, I am literally, and that's my new name, I will title it in the subtext, or in the subtitles, as film apologist.
Film apologist.
Now,
right,
the reason is, and it goes back to what we just said, which is I always look at things and I go, as a filmmaker myself and someone who does short films and things like that, I'm always looking at it through that lens.
Yeah.
So I'm always going, want to clap my hands like, nice shot. Way to put that together.
Exactly.
Way to go. And I'm encouraging them. So I always have that rooted in. I don't think it'll ever leave because I'm always analyzing it with that lens. So with that said, looking into how it holds up, looking into what it means to horror films in general, the characters, the performances, I think the acting aside, we talked about some of the acting. I think I would probably place it at a 9.
Nice.
And those, it's always how you feel too. And having just come off watching it, I'm pumped up about it.
I know, I am too.
So,
which is not what I expected. Cause I always look back at this franchise as kind of like fun, campy stuff. I really genuinely forgot how scary it is.
Well, I think if we go further into the sequels, we'll get a little bit different about our feeling about the franchise to a degree.
I think so.
I think we'll have a different idea about what that means. So this is the last thing I want to do here is read some plot summaries.
Okay.
Now these are written by just random people on the internet.
Okay.
This is a new little piece I've decided to throw in.
I like this.
I want you to tell me if they're good or bad, or give a little through line of good or bad.
Okay.
Because I think, and listen to the particular words. Okay. And anybody who's listening, if you write your own plot summary that's better than any of these, I'll give you a free iTunes gift of A Nightmare on Elm Street.
Oh, I like that.
If I think, and that there's a lot of discretion there, right?
Yeah, right.
Here's one. I'm going to read a few. The monstrous spirit of a slain child murderer seeks revenge by invading the dreams of teenagers whose parents were responsible for his untimely death.
I like it. I don't like calling him a monstrous spirit though, because he's more of a force than that. I think spirit, and I think they're moving stuff around on the table.
Right.
You're seeing it.
He's a force of nature.
He is a force of nature. Right.
And also, I don't like untimely death.
Yeah, untimely death. I didn't even catch that.
This bastard deserved to die.
Absolutely deserved to die.
That's good. So no monstrous spirit and no untimely death. But in terms of seeking revenge and invading the dreams of the teenagers whose parents were responsible, nice little layout there.
Yep, for sure.
Good. This one's a little longer. I'm going to try to keep the shorter ones. Fred Krueger is a substance of nightmares. He always appears strangely dressed and has knives on the fingers of his right hand. A group of 4 teenagers all begin to have the same strange dreams about Fred before one of them is gruesomely murdered in her sleep. The survivors soon realize that if Fred kills them in their sleep, then they will die in real life too. Thus begins an ordeal of wakefulness as they try to find some way to stop Fred.
I love I don't like calling him Fred. I know they call him that in the movie, but I don't like calling him Fred. He's just Freddy to me. But
I agree.
I love the catching sentence, the opener to that. I love it.
Fred Krueger is the substance of nightmares.
Love it.
The
Love
substance
it. The substance
is good.
Yeah.
But there's too much definition in it for me.
Sure,
like
sure.
he always appears strangely dressed with night. Like
Yeah. Too much detail.
Too much.
Yeah.
Okay.
Leave a little bit more mystery there.
Last one. So if you're rating them, we go 1 or 2 so far. What's the best one?
1.
1's the best. I agree. Here's the last one. Nancy and her friends suffer violent nightmares, which all feature one common element: a disfigured serial killer with a glove made of razors on his right hand. When one of the group is murdered while asleep, Nancy realizes that she must stay awake and try to uncover the truth behind this phantasmic killer, Fred Krueger.
That one's not doing it for me.
At
I mean,
all?
technically it's right, but it's just not. I don't know. It's missing something.
Yeah, I think the efficiency is there.
Yeah, the
But
efficiency's
I
there.
also hate the word, and we'll go back, phantasmic.
Yeah, I don't like that. I don't even know what that means.
I don't either, but I just know it's ghostly.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Right.
And he's not a ghost.
He's not a ghost. No.
He's he's a fucking freak of nature. So that one has some good definition, but I
Sure.
don't think it doesn't fall in line. We'll give it to 1
Yeah, I'm gonna give
right
it to
now.
1.
Now, if anyone writes a better one that's better than 1,
Yeah,
then I'll give you a iTunes gift of A Nightmare on Elm Street.
that's a sweet prize.
Yeah, I think so. Right?
Yeah, hell yeah, I like
get
that.
it. You send in your. So this is how you'll do it. You'll send it in on the Facebook channel, right? You'll type in your plot summary, and if you win, I'll get your email and send you an iTunes gift of A Nightmare on Elm Street.
I love it.
Because this month, that's what we're going to do. So with Horror Month, what I want to try to do is those that are listening, I want to incentivize them to continue to listen and become participants in what we're doing. This is a community. I want to build a community of people who care about film, love talking film, and want to interact. So anybody that writes a better plot summary gets a free copy of A Nightmare on Elm Street.
Love it. That's a hell of a prize.
Yeah, hell yeah. Let's do it. So thanks for this cast. Do you have any last notes on Nightmare on Elm Street for me?
No, I loved it. It held up way better than I thought.
I agree. I'd say go watch it. You know, as the month of October rolls around now, this is going to drop on October 1st. So as this month goes in, this is a have to watch.
Yeah,
I think for the month of October.
Definitely.
And next time we're gonna chat Texas Chainsaw Massacre. So stay tuned for that. And thanks for listening. We'll catch you on the other side. This is Tame Aperture Podcast signing out.
The Tame Aperture podcast is produced by Dutch Angle Pictures in association with Studio B Productions. Listen, watch, and subscribe on Apple Podcasts, Google Play, Spotify, and YouTube.